Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Mental Health for Small Business Owners Lunch and Learn. Before we start our program today, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items with each of you. We are recording today's Lunch and Learn, and we will share this with you after the presentation, as well as post this on the Roanoke Regional Small Business Development Center's YouTube channel. If you will, please keep your microphone muted to minimize background noise. Closed captioning is available, and you can choose that option in your Zoom menu that appears at the bottom of your screen. Additionally, if you have any questions, please feel free to add those to the chat that is also available at the menu at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's get started. Today's Lunch and Learn is in collaboration with Psychological Health of Roanoke, Advantage EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, and the Roanoke Regional Small Business Development Center. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about the Roanoke Regional Small Business Development Center for those of you that may not be familiar. The RRSBDC offers pro bono advising, low-cost training, and free tools to help fuel our region's small business success. We are funded through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration and are supported by America's SBDC, the Virginia SBDC, and George Mason University. Local organizations, government offices, and businesses provide matching funds. Our host, who serves as our fiscal agent, is the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce. The Roanoke Regional Small Business Development Center currently serves the Greater Roanoke Valley, Allegheny Highlands, and the New River Valley. We work collaboratively with you to support both current and future business owners through all stages of the business life cycle, whether you're exploring opening a business, you're managing and growing your business, expanding your business, or considering buying or selling a business. Our team of advisors are here to support you on your journey. How do we do this? We offer support through one-on-one confidential advising, various programs, training such as this one today, and various products that are available through our website and through email. Today, I am joined by our Center Director, Amanda Forrester, as well as myself. My name is Heather Fay, and I am the Regional Program Director as well as the Botetourt Advisor. Our other two small business champions are Cheryl Tucker, who is one of our advisors for the New River Valley and Allegheny Highlands, and Tom Tanner, who's our lead advisor for the Greater Roanoke area and is also our Vet Biz Coordinator. We have two other upcoming events that you're welcome to join us for. Speaking to Build Your Business, which is happening tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And we also have a Business Smart Start class that is being offered on June 8th. And we have many other programs that are in the works and being planned as we speak. Additional information for both of these events and registration is available on our website that is noted below. All right, and now for our program. I have the pleasure of introducing our two guests today, Connolly Sanders and Dr. John Heil. Connolly Sanders is an LPC, CEAP, BCC, a licensed professional counselor, certified employee assistance professional, and a board-certified life coach. Connolly holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from the College of William & Mary, Go Tribe, and has over 25 years of experience in counseling, EAP, and coaching. She believes in helping individuals reach their goals, utilizing and maximizing their strengths. The values of compassion and respect drive Connolly's interactions with individuals and organizations, whether in consultations, trainings, or meetings. Wellness, self-esteem, mood disorders, health issues, grief, anxiety, compassion, fatigue, and marital and parenting issues are of special interest to her. We also are joined by Dr. John Heil. John is a clinical and sports psychologist with Psychological Health of Roanoke. He is a lecturer at Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine, Go Hokies, and an instructor at the Roanoke Police Academy. John has served as a chair of the USA Fencing Sports Medicine and Science for over 15 years as the director of sports medicine for the Commonwealth State Games of Virginia for over 20 years, and is on the board of Virginia Amateur Sports and International Swim Coaches Association. Dr. Heil is a fellow in American Psychological Association and the Association of Applied Sports Psychology, and is the past president of Psychological Association, Society of Sport, Exercise, and Performance Psychology. Wow, what a great team we have with us today. Dr. Heil and Connolly, we are so excited for you all to join us today so we can learn about mental health for small business. All right, take it away.
Hi, yes, nice to meet you all. I'm John Heil. I'd like to say right up front, as a member and partner of Psychological Health Roanoke, we are also a small business, and I'm one of the partners, owners, and we've struggled in many ways, just like I assume many of you have. And I hope that the presentation I can present today reflects both what I know as a psychologist and also what I've experienced as a small business owner in this very difficult time. Even being a psychologist, it's always a struggle to deal with psychological issues when they come into your life at a personal level. I think it is fair to say that COVID is a disruptor on a scale that none of us have ever really seen in our life, in the sense of so many people being so deeply and so significantly affected. And unfortunately, the pandemic has gone on for long enough that we've actually been able to do some research and gather some data and try to understand who's being affected and how. And somewhat to the surprise of many, it seems like the Generation Z is having the greatest difficulty. And they're sort of the pivot point. They're the peak of the worst symptoms. And we think that's probably because they're in a period of life when there's a lot of rapid transition and they're really facing an uncertain future with very little life experience to use to ground themselves as they move from the situation they're in to whatever's next, whatever that might be. Of course, there's a lot of worries out there beyond the pandemic, societally and personally. And these are functionally a pile-on effect. So we're all dealing with all the effects of the pandemic, the effects of society, and whatever it is in our personal life that we're trying to deal with, and where we are in our phase of life developmentally. And the Gen Z group is really in this very critical phase. And we think that's why it's been probably toughest on them. It's been difficult on everyone though. And interestingly, as you can see from the data here, the older you go, the generally speaking, the better people seem to be able to cope. And the group that's coping the best are those that are older. And I think we don't know exactly why, but we can speculate. And what we do speculate is that people have been through things before and have some reservoir and experience to draw on. And that's the thought process that everyone seems to keep coming back to. I think there's some advantage in terms of it. In later stages of life, there's less developmental changes taking place. So it's easier for us to see our way from the beginning of the pandemic to the end of the pandemic, sort of fitting in within a phase of our life. Whereas people that are younger, they're dealing with getting through the pandemic as they move from one phase of life to another. This is not something that they know and could articulate necessarily in terms of life transitions. But it is happening, and that is their day to day, and they feel those stressors and those pressures. So next slide. Okay, so we know that stress makes problems, but how does that actually work? And how is it that a difficult situation can result in a mental health issue? And it's a complicated question, but for the sake of simplicity, I would say it's useful to think of any disruptor. It could be COVID, any stressor in your life tends to have two dimensions to it. It has a loss dimension and a threat dimension. The loss dimension is that empty present, the thing that I used to be able to do, the person that I used to be able to be, the situation that was around me before but is not there now. And that's an emptiness, a feeling of loss. And the ultimate loss is death of a loved one or death of personal death. And a lot of the same dynamics do play out in those situations, those feelings of loss. The idea of loss versus depression is a normal reaction to a highly stressful situation. And there is this transition process as people work their way through loss, hopefully as things get better to help along the way. But sometimes the transition's not complete, and so feelings of loss can ultimately evolve into sadness, helplessness, and apathy, at which point we're at a tipping point for depression. Similarly, for threat, a normal condition associated with stress, uh, efforts at coping with the uncertain future, the unknown. Again, some people are going to be able to work through this, sometimes time and others help, but sometimes we don't work through it. And the example here that I'm referencing is a sport-related example. And we'll come back to the sport-related examples because I think in some ways they're simpler and easier to understand than just general overall concepts. So if we talk about, for instance, an athlete that's been injured and trying to return to play, or a person that's been injured and trying to get back to their job, we could say it broadens out greatly. So there's that fear of that uncertain future. It affects re-injury, team status, finances. And if you think in an industrial employment frame, you can create, I think, pretty direct parallels there. And so that type of worry, to the extent it becomes ruminative preoccupation, it can be destructive and disruptive, and then tip into an anxiety condition. What we tend to overlook with psychological conditions is that there's always a physical component to them. So with anxiety, the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight system tends to kick in, and it creates muscle tension, it creates vigilance, preoccupation, and so forth. Those are drivers. And we need to treat those as well as the psychological symptoms, understanding that there's an underlying biological imperative. And so these types of processes can be addressed with mindfulness. Sometimes you need medication though. Again, the depressive symptom is involved more with what we call the neurovegetative system in the body, just a subset of the nervous system. And with depression, there's physical changes that may cause fatigue, lethargy, sleep disturbance, pain sensitivity, and so forth. And so that's the biological substrate of depression, and one of the reasons that medicines can be helpful. Always behavioral interventions are helpful. Sometimes, though, we need both. Okay, next slide. Go ahead, Heather. Thank you. So this is a little bit of a busy and complicated slide, but what I want to introduce is stress-related growth. So to start with, there's a phrase, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Well, maybe, maybe not. Sometimes people aren't killed, but they're crippled. They're left so that they're not quite the same. And so what we notice in any kind of trauma, and again, I'll reference sport injury, I think, as a good example. What we notice is there's really three outcomes. The person can fully recover and get back to baseline. Sometimes people really don't recover. They're changed forever after that. And it could take a long time to work through that. Now, there's some people that come back stronger and better. And that's what we're calling stress-related growth. And sport's a really nice example because we can identify some of the specific elements that help make that happen. So to help us with that, though, let's go to the graph. And let's start on the right side of the graph. So PTG is post-traumatic growth, the top circle. The bottom is PTSD. The classic symptoms of PTSD are intrusion, thoughts coming into everyday consciousness, dreams, avoidant behavior of feared situations, and then this kind of elevated anxiety and stress reactivity. Now, the flip side of that, of post-traumatic growth, has to do with really redefining a new future for yourself. And the idea behind this, the idea of this organismic valuing theory, which is supported by research, including research in sport, is that when we create a major or encounter a major disruptor, we have an innate drive to adapt to that. And the leading way in which we adapt to that is by changing our worldview. It forces us to see the things in our life differently. It's kind of like the idea of older but wiser. And if we can move through things in that way, we have the potential to get the best outcome that we can. And sometimes people do come back stronger. We've seen people recover, particularly in sports situations from unusual injuries. Recent program on TV, Alex Smith, quarterback, severe injury, almost lost his leg. Really incredible rehab story. And there's many examples out there like that. Now, if we look at the left side of the graph, what we'll see is the tipping point, the two middle of the four boxes, reflective rumination and brooding rumination. When something bad happens, you're going to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's going to occupy you and even preoccupy you. And the whole tipping point seems to be, how is the person able to manage that thought process? It will be intensive, it will be repetitive, but how do you work your way through that and come out to the other side? And typically it begins with someone revaluing in their life. There's many things often that we take for granted, and we may gain new appreciation for those when we have other losses around us. And so some of the benefit is in seeing the world in a new way, is revaluing, finding more importance in everyday simpler things, and often realizing that they always were that important to us, but we just didn't fully appreciate those. In the sport example, we know there's very specific things that happen. We know that when you go through rehab, it can make you smarter about biomechanics. It can make you smarter about pain tolerance. We know it forces you to up your mental game in terms of your ability to focus, concentrate, commit to goals, and so forth. And again, I think these same types of processes apply in one way or another in pretty much any situation. There is this opportunity for new learning. Often in a situation of trauma, there are other helpers around who can guide you through this process of new learning, new ideas, new skills, and in that way help make you stronger. So I guess what we want to say is we're trying to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And so I have to ask, has anyone looked at the upper right of the slide? And when you look, what do you see? So if you look and you focus on the black, you see the word victory. But if you look and focus on the yellow, you see defeat. So many things are really in how you look at them. So thanks for your attention. I know that Connolly wanted to provide some feedback on a really great article that recently appeared in the New York Times.
Yeah, thanks, John. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I believe of course, John and I are about mental health. That is what we do. That's kind of our life's work. And what prompted this opportunity, this conversation, was an article that came out in the New York Times written by Adam Grant, who is an occupational psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. I think the Wharton School of Business, maybe. Not sure about that, but anyway. And he wrote an article called or titled Languishing. And so what I thought I'd do is talk a little bit about that, because the other interesting thing is I am the EAP coordinator for Advantage EAP, and I'm in charge of writing the monthly newsletter. And for May, I wrote the monthly newsletter about Adam Grant's article, Languishing. So that's why I want to talk about it. So it is that feeling of blah. So it's not, Adam Grant kind of refers to it as, well, these are my words. He calls it the middle child of mental health. I call it the redheaded stepchild. But however you want to look at it, it is not mental health. So you're not flourishing. And it's not necessarily mental illness where perhaps you need medication or you have a serious diagnosis. It's that space in the middle. And Merriam-Webster's defines languishing as to become dispirited. And languishing is that middle space where maybe we don't really feel depressed, but yet we're not really feeling great either. We might lay in bed longer, or we might hit the snooze longer than normal. It just kind of takes us more time to get up and going in the morning. We might be on our phones more, playing games, checking out, so to speak. Maybe we're scrolling through TikTok. That's a rabbit hole we can go down for a long time, isn't it? Maybe we're watching reruns. So things we've seen before, movies or shows, because Netflix and Prime and all those are streaming lots of old shows, we'll rewatch them again. Maybe we're feeling just disinterested in things. So we're not hopeless. So languishing is not that sense of hopeless, but we're not really motivated and we're not really excited. And I think a lot of people can relate to this feeling, especially I call it the umbrella of COVID. So one of the things, or the pandemic umbrella, one of the things that I think is important to understand is that there is this thing that's kind of hanging over us, which is dealing with the pandemic. It leaks in and has filtered into almost every aspect of our lives, from how we shop, what we buy, maybe what we're even focused on. I'll be glad when I get through my pandemic supply of toilet paper, because I had to buy the cheap stuff because it's all I could find for a while. So I'm anxiously getting rid of that now. But, shopping to interacting or not interacting. I didn't hug my mama, who's 82, for a year. We were really careful. She has a lung disease, so we had to be careful about it. It's impacted every area. My children came home. They were grown, had their own places. They didn't want to ride out the pandemic by themselves. I didn't blame them, so they came home. Well, then we're all home again. So we had to adjust to that. So it affects every area of our lives. And so we have this umbrella, and the feelings, because counselors like to talk about feelings. I talk about feelings. I encourage people to talk about feelings. You need to feel your feelings. Where do you feel them in your body? The whole bit. But we have these feelings associated with this umbrella. However you feel about it, wherever you are on the continuum, there are feelings about this umbrella of the pandemic. And languishing is just that middle place where we are aimless, joyless maybe, and we're just kind of going through the motions of the day without any real focus or intention. So one of the things which John kind of pointed out is at the beginning of the pandemic, we were in fight or flight mode. It was an immediate, a threat was presented to us, and we moved into what we needed to do. We started safety measures. Businesses were shutting down. Schools were shutting down. Education looked different. Our work looked different. And in the beginning, a lot of people I talked to were wiping down items before they came in the house. We just didn't know. And information, the other thing about this is information was changing. It seemed like every hour we were learning something new about this situation and having to adjust. And as John was talking about, anytime you're faced with change, it creates stress. So one way to look at adjusting is kind of like an inverted bell curve. So we go through these emotions anytime we adjust to any kind of change. And this was a big dip because this affected all areas of our lives. Sometimes it's a little dip, but we go through feelings. We have emotions about it. Our mental health is impacted just like our physical health can be too. And we're still learning about it. We don't really know what the long-term impact of the pandemic is and how this might affect our mental health long-term. However, there are some things that we can do to help our mental health. So I like to talk about tools because for me, when I work with my clients, that seems to, give them something that they can, okay, I can try this and let's see how it works. Now, not everything is going to work. That's why you experiment, you practice, you try it until you can figure out what kind of works well for you. So the first thing we can do is name it. So mental health counselors and therapists and psychologists have long supported identifying emotions and feelings. It is important to say what it is, face it, and identify what we are experiencing, instead of repressing it and ignoring it and pretending like it's not really there. And the reason why we say that is, so one metaphor I use is, if you keep sweeping things under the carpet, eventually you're going to have this big bump in the middle of the rug and you're going to trip over it. So it's not advisable to do that. So we need to name it. It also helps us demystify it, I guess, if you will. We can create a greater understanding of ourselves. And even when we understand ourselves, we can have compassion and compassion for others. So for ourselves and for others. And it gives us options. We feel a little less stuck. Oh, I'm angry. Okay. What am I going to do with this anger now? Let me figure out. Maybe I'll go for a walk. Or maybe I need to go scream in a pillow, or, whatever you might need to do when you feel angry. So naming it is important. The next thing is flow. And all of this is taken from Adam's article. So he talks about flow. And flow is when we, some people call it being in the zone. It's when we get into something, a task, a project, an activity, and we completely lose track of time, completely lose track of stuff going on around us, and we are so focused on what we're doing, all that just melts away. Raise your hands, those of you that I can see that have ever experienced flow. Okay, flow is awesome. We feel so much better when we can experience that flow. We are just doing what we're doing. We're in the present moment. So flow is actually connected to mindfulness, which I'm sure everybody has heard about because we talk about mindfulness all the time. You're not worried about the future. You're not worried about the past. You are simply in the moment. And immersion in projects really helps us cope with challenges, and it helps us avoid languishing. And it's hard to get into flow, especially when we all have cell phones. It is easy to get distracted, and, text will come up. We get little dings for social media for people that are on that, and we just get distracted by these things. So it actually, flow takes intention. So just like mindfulness does. So you want to intentionally turn off the phone or put it in another room or get away from it. Flow, you can experience flow in nature, unplugging, getting away, getting out, away from things that keep us from being and doing. So I experience flow every month when I write the newsletter. I will procrastinate it. I will say that. But once I get it going, I unplug from everything, close my door, and I sit down. And before I know it, maybe 2 hours has gone by because I'm a slow writer. It takes me a while. So, and I just melt away into what I'm doing. And it feels good. It feels good to get into flow. So you want to create opportunities for flow. You can do that through any activity that you enjoy doing, or even It can happen at work sometimes. You get so focused on what you're doing that you don't really know what's going on. But a lot of times it really, in today's technology world, it takes intention. So you might need to, which goes into the next one, which is time. You might need to purposefully carve out time in your day. It's hard to do. We've got so much going on. We've got so many tasks, so many jobs to do, but we may need to put into our calendar 2 hours or an hour. This is when I'm going to do the newsletter, and not take calls, not look at your email, turn off your phone, or this is when I'm going to work on this project, and this is all I'm going to do, and purposefully not take calls. Scheduling time is important. Maybe you schedule time for a hike. Maybe you schedule time for a workout. Maybe you schedule time to knit, whatever it is that you do. But you may have to schedule it, because especially with a lot of us working from home, when our home and our work life really merges, it is hard to separate that out. And there's less opportunity for flow when that happens. So it does require intention. So another thing that might help that is something that I call bookending your day. So if you're working from home, you bookend your day. So you have a little routine that you do at the beginning of your day that signifies, this is me starting work. I'm at home, but I'm starting work. It could be, I have this whole little thing I do, but it could be as simple as turning on the lights, turning on the computer. And in my head, as I'm doing these things, I say to myself, this is me starting my day. I'm coming into work, because it's just me going up the stairs and going into my room. I'm at work today, but a lot of times I work at home. And then at the end of the day, you have a routine that you do, maybe turning out the lights, turning off the computer, straightening up your desk, getting ready for the next day. And you're saying to yourself, this is me ending my day. This is, maybe you express some gratitude for something that you accomplished that day. And then I have a sound machine outside my door at home. And so when I turn that off, it announces to everybody in the family, Mama's no longer working. And you can talk to me now, because you can't talk to me before then. So that's a way to kind of carve out space and time. So this sense of accomplishment really buoys our self-worth. It is a pleasant feeling, when we get into flow, and we feel like we have value, and it fights languishing. And then the other thing that he talks about is setting small goals. Goal setting really does help, and it doesn't have to be a big elaborate process. It can be small things that provides us baby steps. So I don't know how many of you all have ever seen the movie What About Bob? Filmed at Smith Mountain Lake. Okay, so the scene where he's trying to get on the bus, Bill Murray's trying to get on the bus, and he's trying to get out of his apartment. He's got the fish around his neck, and all he keeps going is baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. Well, before you know it, you're at Lake Winnipesaukee, because you have a series of 1,000 steps has finally gotten you to where you need to be. They can be tiny little goals. It does not have to be big. But it's like working a jigsaw puzzle. Each little piece, you just put it together slowly, but eventually your picture will be completed. So the structure of goals just gives us a direction. Setting personal goals kind of gives us a focus, purpose, a sense of purpose. We want to have a sense of purpose. That's really important to us. It helps us feel more in control, less stuck. And again, it's crucial for helping us battle the chaos, which is this pandemic umbrella, because things are always changing all the time. The other thing is we can't change that. We have no control over this umbrella. All we can do is focus on ourselves, how we're navigating, what works for us, what helps us feel better. And what helps our mental health. So the thing to remember is that, mental health is as important as physical health. If you get nothing else from what I say today, take that. It is important. We're all used to focusing on our physical health. If our blood sugars are crazy, we go to the doctor and we maybe get on medicine or talk about a diet change. I have high cholesterol because I've inherited that. So, I've got to take medication because I don't want to have a stroke or a heart attack. So I want to try to take care of that. So it is also important for us to take care of our mental health. It is just as detrimental to us to deny our mental health as it is our physical health. If we ignore our physical health, we will become very sick. And in some cases, if we ignore it, we could even die. It is important to take care of our mental health. So the ways we take care of our mental health, and remember, our bodies and minds are connected. So as you take care of your physical health, you're taking care of your mental health too. So all the stuff we know to do, sleep, exercise, drink a lot of water, eat right, all those things are important for our physical health. But also taking time to work on increasing opportunities for flow, acknowledging your thoughts and feelings and naming them for situations, reaching out to others, having that support system, not feeling so alone because you're not alone. Whether you reach out to professional people such as John or myself, or just having a support group. Maybe you go to a support group meeting or you have good friends. Addressing self-defeating thoughts. So the way we think about things affects the way we feel about things, which then affects the way we behave. It's all connected. And extending compassion to ourselves and others are all ways to help our mental health. So when we incorporate healthy mind, body, spirit activities, we feel better about ourselves, bottom line. And our mental health improves. So I'm wondering what questions or thoughts people have about languishing and kind of how to address it. Or John, if you have anything you want to add.
Oh, thanks, Conley. Seems really thorough and complete, and nice blend of how I see things and a fresh perspective on the same general ideas. So yeah, just think very helpful.
What questions do people have?
Conley, I just wanted to read a comment made earlier that Alex said, I didn't know flow was connected to mindfulness. Thank you for saying that. So I wanted to share that with you. I think it's important sometimes to make those connections, and that was a good one.
Okay, thank you.
I have just a comment, I guess, and a question along with it. I was reading recently that, particularly among small business owners, at the SBC, we work with them every day. Every week, just so many. Last year, we worked with over 1,700 small business owners, and obviously we're walking right along with them as they were experiencing so much of this, whether it be languishing or just, traumatic events that were happening to them and their business. They were stressed, and oftentimes depressed in their business, but also they had all the things going on at home and the adjustments with their kids or, any type of family things that were going on. And I read recently that, outside of the pandemic, in a normal year, 62% of small business owners feel depressed at least once a week. I thought that's a high amount. Like, I totally get it during the pandemic, but this was like, a normal year. And I've been thinking a lot about what we hear from people, and that is that not only are they concerned about their business, their own livelihood, their own families, but they're also just as concerned about their team or their employees or their staff, whatever word they use for that, and their livelihood. So many people, so many small businesses had to let people go that they've, were almost family with, because small businesses are small and you treat everyone that way. And I'm wondering how we know, you all shared so much today and thinking about our own mental health and how we handle that. Are there any tips for us as we think about, okay, I'm going to take care of myself and that helps take care of others too. But what do I do about these same feelings that I'm having for the people that work with me? Right. And I'm responsible for their livelihood. And that's in jeopardy or was in jeopardy. Maybe they've reinstated some of those. But what are some tips that we can take in or understand as we think about other people and we're depressed, stressed, anxious, or whatever those words are for us, for others?
I
You
let
want to
me
go first?
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So I'll speak to our experience here. What we've tried to do is just be more transparent with what we're doing and why we're doing it and what our concerns are. And by doing that, I think in an ongoing way, we help people understand when events come that they're not necessarily happy with, that they sense where they're coming from. And so we try to take away so much surprise. And by providing explanation, I think we help people understand really why things are happening. Because when we make changes or make decisions and don't explain why, I think they're just left to their own devices to think what they may think. And they may be accurate or they may be inaccurate. They may catastrophize, they may personalize. And so that I think is the single most consistent thing we've done across the board in our business is just try to explain more things to more people in a personal way, which we're small enough to be able to do. So.
Yeah, piggybacking on that, my years of working in employee assistance programs in lots of businesses and organizations and working with various leaders, big and small. The thing that helps the most is communication. The thing that is usually the worst is communication. People don't know how to communicate. It is hard to communicate and talk about difficult things. It is, especially when you're a small business and you're probably close to people, it's hard to share difficult news. But John that's been my experience, is he's right about it. Communicate, over communicate if you need to, because human beings don't like gaps or vacuums, if you will. And if there's space and they don't have the information, they will fill it. And they usually fill it with wrong information. Because we all have these stories in our head and we'll get going with a story in our head. And before we know it, it's been catastrophized or whatever, however it goes. So communication, I think, is key to help that. Over communicate, being as transparent as you can possibly be helps. It's not going to make the bad news go away necessarily, and difficult things may still happen. But the communication definitely helps. What most people tell me is, why didn't they just tell me that? Why? I just needed to know that.
One thing I would add to that is I think we want to provide realistically positive information as well. We want to express our fears. We want to express our hopes and what we're doing to try to overcome the fears and accomplish what we would like to accomplish. And we have to check our own emotions, because if we're distressed about a situation, then we're going to convey that to other people. Because when we communicate not just in words, but with our emotions. People are pretty good at reading one another. We do it all day, every day throughout our lives. And so that idea of trying to be positive, but not falsely positive, like, oh, everything's just going to be fine, everything will work out. Not that kind of positive. It's like, here's what we're doing to try to accomplish this. That type of realistically positive, objective, and explanation.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you don't want to be Pollyanna.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not good.
I like that face, Conley. You're like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Cheryl I'm reading from the chat here. Cheryl had a great question. What method is the best way to communicate, especially in a tech and Zoom world?
I think that's a generational question to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but generation aside, I think there's certain communications that should be done in a more live and interactive communication form, whether that be face-to-face live, face-to-face Zoom, voice-to-voice by phone versus text. So I think there's a lot of over texting, people sending information by text that it's not the right way to send the information either, because it's too sensitive and it needs a human component behind it that's really lost in texting, or it's just too complicated to explain in the text. You really can't get that information across. My sense is there is some kind of fearfulness about this person-to-person communication with younger generations, and I can tell you, I do not understand why that is. That said, I know I started texting because I found that my children would respond to me more quickly if I texted them than if I tried to call them. So that was my personal change quite some time ago. It's like, time for me to learn to text. Or not that it's so hard, but that I make that part of my repertoire.
Yeah,
You all have,
well, I was just gonna say, sometimes there can be that fear or conflict avoidant thing that can happen with communication. Maybe you know that something you're communicating, it might be difficult to hear or uncomfortable. And most people, not many people charge into conflict, most of us avoid it. So I think there's that piece. And I liked what John said about checking yourself. It's first you got to manage yourself before you kind of enter into that communication space. Sometimes it helps to have a vision of, what is your hope for how you would like to be perceived, or kind of your goal for the end of the conversation. How do I want to be in this space? Sometimes that helps.
you all have given me a great, well, I don't know if it's a great idea, but an idea for a future conversation is around how to have difficult conversations. I read a book recently about that I actually let someone borrow and I need to get back. But we should do another session and talk about communication, and particularly around difficult conversations.
Yeah.
I'm reading chat here, and Alex had a great comment based on, I think probably John, on your comment. I don't know why some people like the text, or the younger generation. And his comment was fearful, avoidance, and anxious, preoccupied. I was thinking, I would just add on to that. I have a teenage son, but I also fall in a lot of these categories too. Sometimes I feel like I was born in the wrong year, like I was born too late. And for me, like text communication or Zoom, or ways that you can communicate that are far more effective than email. And I know everyone on my team knows I'm anti-email. I cannot stand email. It's less about avoidance and more about efficiency, right? Like you can be so much more efficient and direct, particularly for someone like me that has a very direct personality. I don't like to fluff and talk before and after. It's like, here's the point. And text allows you to do that, or it doesn't have to just be text. It could be other communications methods that you might use. Slack. A lot of us use Slack for communication within our businesses. And a lot of it is that it's just directness, where a conversation is not as direct. An email can be, but is often read wrong, right? Where text, everyone expects it to be very direct.
So the interesting thing about that is being aware of communication hopefully drives connection, not disconnection. And so you want to kind of think about it's when you're talking about that you like to kind of talk in bullet points is kind of what I hear. I just got to get this information out here. I don't want to hear about your weekend. But other people would almost feel like, well, what did I do wrong? She's not asking me about my weekend, because they're the fluff. They want to, and I have worked with a lot of people in EAP to help them. And that's funny because this one man that I was working with, I said, we got to help you with your fluff language. You're not using enough fluff. And he's like, I got to do that. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to do it some. So that's interesting that you share that.
Yeah. Or don't work with others. I'll never forget when when I sold my last business, she said, well, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I'll tell you what I don't want to do. I don't want to work with a lot of people. And that's not really true, but it was based on that, right? Like, having to really alter, I don't want to say alter who I am, but have those, constant, like, okay, I need to do this, that, and the other because of the way I need to communicate with other people.
Well, I call it
great.
Stretching. You're just stretching.
Right.
You don't use all the time.
It's more than stretching for me.
Yeah, but you're doing a great job of stretching today. I would never have known that about you if you hadn't shared that.
That's great.
Any other questions about mental health? And I like the comment, I'm too fluffy. I don't know. We're just going to stretch your non-fluffy muscles every now and then.
Everybody that's on the call today, our secret word is fluffy. That's great. Well, I know it's time to wrap up. And for everyone on here, my name is Amanda. I'm with the Small Business Development Center. I do want to remind everyone that it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and that's why we wanted to do this today, to bring everyone together to start having this conversation. And if you'll follow along on our social media on Facebook or Instagram, we're at RRSBDC. We're posting stuff all month long around mental health, just tips and ideas, sometimes just quotes that we can relate to. So pay close attention to that and engage with us there. We'd love to hear how people are feeling. Fluff or not, we want to hear, while we're not in a position to help, we can certainly pull in the right resources to help and really destigmatize mental health and our opportunity to get help. There's so many opportunities today for us to seek that out. And so I personally want to thank Conley, you and John for being here to talk about this today in the way that you have and open this up, particularly for small business owners. It's a lonely world as a small business owner. I know, I talk to people all the time and I'm like, I was in, my bedroom last night crying over this thing. And I'm like, yeah, we all were. We were all in our bedrooms crying, not knowing that the people across the street were also in their bedrooms crying. So thank you for helping us open up to that and offering it.
Welcome.
And then Heather, I'll let you close us out. I just wanted to say that before we ended.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. And thank you, John and Connolly, for being so gracious with your time and resources and energy and coming along to partner with us for our first Lunch and Learn. And I've got my notes, how to have a difficult conversation, Amanda, on my bright orange sticky. So we will continue this conversation, and thank you to each of you for spending your lunch hour with us. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and please reach out and let us know how we can support you on your journey. Thank you all.
Bye.